Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 28th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Okay, turning to the campaign, a lot of stuff going on right now. Everybody's out there at the campaigning in the states where upcoming primaries. But the dynamic seems to have changed, and more people are of the opinion that last Tuesday really did decide who the candidates are going to be. Skullduggery at a brokered convention or an assassin's bullet, being the only possible changes to that. It's going to be Donald Trump, going to be Hillary Clinton. And we're seeing articles out here where Trump is picking up momentum. Over at ex-Republic TV, Donald Trump's popularity grows in the Republican Party. And they're talking about exit polls coming out of Tuesday night where people are just signing on to the Trump train or the Trump bandwagon. And he's gaining momentum. He's extending his lead. Now, at this point, neither Ted Cruz nor John Kasich could achieve enough delegates for a first ballot nomination. It is now hopelessly out of their reach. So Cruz is aiming for a contested convention where he will try and steal the nomination away from Donald Trump. But as Kasich and Cruz begin to wither on the vine, so to speak, Trump may start picking up enough delegates to be able to do that, which is why we should all go on posting these articles reminding everybody that Ted Cruz was born in Canada. He was born a Canadian citizen. He was born out of wedlock, so he does not qualify for U.S. citizenship, even though his mother was from Delaware, ignoring the fact that she became a Canadian citizen prior to his birth. Ted Cruz is not eligible to be President of the United States of America. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Now, Donald Trump is starting to act like he's going to be the GOP nominee. He has toned down his approach during his foreign policy speech yesterday. He was actually looking presidential, and he was making a lot of sense. And people are very much divided on that speech. Obviously, the establishment neocons are in a panic because Donald Trump is clearly not going along with this. We're going to conquer the world and make them do what we want. But he's riding a fine line saying that, yes, America's military needs to be strong to defend us against attack. Well, I got a little surprise for the neocons there. You can defend America from attack right here on U.S. soil. You do not need 700 military bases around the world to wave at local governments to remind them to behave. That's like the old Roman Empire approach. We're going to garrison those conquered provinces and remind those slaves they must be loyal to Rome. That approach is kind of wearing out. This nation has not actually been attacked since the end of World War II. The Japanese dropped some balloon bombs up on the Pacific Northwest. That was it. We can defend this country from attack with the nuclear forces only. Nobody's going to mess with the United States because the result would be your country gets turned into a giant green glowing glass parking lot. We'll send the Marines in to paint the stripes. All this other branches of the U.S. military, the littoral combat ships, the carriers, all of it are about projecting U.S. power into other countries. That's not defense. That's offense. That's aggression. That's belligerence. Now, retired General Barry McCaffrey was out there describing Trump's foreign policy speech as tremendous. The people who know that war is morally wrong, that we are going to lose this war, the professionals who can see that the path the nation is on is headed for failure, are all out there saying Trump's foreign policy speech hit the right tone, the balance between pulling back from all the aggression and not hamstringing the military that we do need to defend us. Now, as you heard on the news break, and it's all over the corporate media, John Boehner has just uncorked on Ted Cruz, calling him Lucifer in the flesh, and other words I cannot say on the radio or the FCC will take the license away. And Cruz is out there saying, I hardly ever spoke to him. I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe that's the problem, Ted. But Boehner basically came on out and said that he is going to support Donald Trump and not Cruz. Now, is Boehner really a fan of Donald Trump? Maybe. Maybe not. There's another issue, and this gets back to what I was saying at the top of the show. Ted Cruz is ineligible to be president of the United States of America. And everybody in the GOP who looked the other way is now realizing that if the public in general learns of this, it's only going to hammer home Donald Trump's point that the GOP party machine is totally corrupt and totally rigged. They were trying to put a Canadian in the Oval Office, which is unconstitutional. So maybe Boehner has decided the time has come to give Ted Cruz the heave-ho before this scandal really becomes any more widely known than it already is. Now, not everybody was happy with Trump's speech. And over at Bloomberg, they had this individual, Eli Lake, who attacked Donald Trump, saying that his policy of America first sounds like Nazi rhetoric. You can't be America first. You have to be Israel first. And if you read this Eli Lake's articles, it's clear he's an Israel firster. The United States is only allowed to exist as long as we serve Tel Aviv. That's his editorial attitude. So he's out there attacking Donald Trump, saying that America first, that's Nazi speaking. And if you don't want to be a Nazi, you go back to being Israel first. So they're out there pushing this Donald Trump is Hitler thing. And the article was illustrated with a picture of Hitler and a picture of Donald Trump. And Hitler's giving the Hitler salute and Donald Trump is waving. And we're supposed to say, ooh, that proves it. Donald Trump is Hitler. In disguise. He didn't die down there in South America and the rest of it. And when they cannot win the debate with facts and logic and law, of course, they go into the smearing, the implication. Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Hitler. Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Ivan the Terrible. Donald Trump is the true son of Darth Vader. Donald Trump shot down the Hindenburg. He's a crazy gun nut. And on and on and on and on and on. Donald Trump scares a lot of people, which is one of the reasons I am supporting him. But I hope he will be careful and remember what happened to Robert Kennedy when it became obvious he was going to be the nominee for his party, because he was a threat to the establishment. And Donald Trump has already indicated that when he becomes president, he's going to go after the Clintons and their crimes. And I'm going to send in a resume. I want a job doing that, going after the Clintons. I'm willing to make that a full-time career. Actually, I have for the last 22 years. Now, as we know, Ted Cruz, in an act of utter desperation, has named Carly Fiorina, former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, who almost destroyed the place, as his vice president, should he get the nomination. And it's a Hail Mary pass. And apparently halfway through this press conference, Carly Fiorina decides to break into song and sing a lullaby to Cruz's daughters, who are actually a little bit too old for that lullaby treatment. So apparently something is going on inside Carly's head. Maybe like that former attorney general who used to get up there and sing When the Eagles Soar, and he was terrible, couldn't hold pitch with a forklift. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, yesterday we were talking about how Bernie Sanders is starting to give off indications he's about to wind down his campaign, starting to let people go. And he made a statement on a town hall on MSNBC that he is not going to tell his supporters to vote for Hillary Clinton. It is up to her to woo them. And now there are rumors circulating that Hillary is going to name Bernie Sanders as her running mate, as vice president, in order to prevent Bernie Sanders supporters from deserting to, that guy with the blonde hair. So there's some high stakes playing here right now. Now, getting on back to Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina. Carly Fiorina is now calling on John Kasich to drop out, okay, which is proving just how clueless she is, because Kasich beat Cruz 4 out of 5 last Tuesday. If John Kasich drops out, his voters will likely swing to Trump, locking in that first ballot nomination. And now we're understanding why Carly Fiorina almost destroyed Hewlett-Packard. She's as brainless as Caribou Barbie. All right, we've got a bunch of callers waiting on the line here. We're going to start with Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, I just want to let you know, on my way to work, I was listening to Glenn Beck just to know what the enemy was thinking. And he made a statement kind of like hinting that America First basically means Nazism. And the fact of the matter is, America First was started at a time because people were fed up with World War I. We had no business meddling in Europe war and World War
No, it even goes back earlier than that. I mean, isn't it common sense that the government and people of a nation should be for that nation first and foremost ahead of all others? Washington warned us in his farewell address about foreign entanglements. And I've been saying all along, no government can serve two masters. And the government that serves Israel does not, will not, and cannot serve the American people. We need leaders who will put America first, second, and third. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is saying. And that is scaring the heck out of all of the Israeli parasites that infest our government, who are worried that a Trump presidency means an end to the endless access to your wallets. And that's why they're coming up now saying, America first, they must be Nazis because they're refusing to go on propping up Israel.
Yeah, but it's not only Israel, it's also these Russia folks are upset that he said he wanted to have peace with Russia, which makes sense.
Of course it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. The only reason the U.S. government wants war with Russia and China is they want to try and bring back the days of Bretton Woods, where everybody on earth has to use the U.S. paper dollar for cross-border trade and banking, off of which the U.S. financial system makes a mafia-like piece of the action. And those days are going away. And they're literally, we have a government that is so fossilized mentally. They want to use force of arms to drag the world out of the 21st century back to the 1950s. That's how foolish this whole concept is right from the start.
And I was reading also on INFOWARS website, Lindsey Graham was talking all kinds of stuff, comparing, I think the campaign endorsement, as far as I'm concerned, for Trump, but I don't think he meant it as that, comparing Donald Trump to Ron Paul's foreign policy, which would be awesome if he did have Ron Paul.
They were similar policies, and that's why they're under attack, because the people who are currently in office in Washington, D.C., they got there by davening to Tel Aviv and taking Israeli money, and Hillary's off to Tel Aviv for a fundraiser right now. They're all whores and prostitutes. They're willing to sell themselves to Israel, and once they're bought by Israel, they stay bought. And now all of a sudden we have a politician, a candidate who's got his own money, who can't be bought, who's pointedly not taking money from large corporations and AIPAC, and he's scaring them because it's going to mean an end to that little party where they live lives of wealth and privilege and authority as long as they're willing to sell out the American people to a foreign government in Tel Aviv. And the party's over.
Do you remember when Carly Fiorina, was first, during the debate? She said the first thing she would do was call, when she's sworn in as president, is call Netanyahu up and ask him basically what he needs. And then, of course, she said how she would be in Russia's face. I have NATO all over the Eastern Europe and fighter planes close to the Russian border and pretty much dare Putin to do something. Those are her tools, I think.
She demonstrated. She's just like the rest of them. She's ready to loot the United States for Israel and start a war with Russia to protect the U.S. dollar because that's what her owners tell her to do. And, what's amazing, of course, is how she's flipped around, because during the early part of the GOP campaign, Carly Fiorina was declaring Ted Cruz is a lying politician. And she was even saying that they should elect somebody outside the establishment. Of course, they meant her, a woman. And I don't think Ted Cruz really thought it all the way through before naming Carly Fiorina. He just said, okay, we need a woman running mate so I can take votes away from Hillary Clinton.
The other thing is, I think people need to get together and understand who and what Glenn Beck is. This is a dangerous psychopath, and we should try to, get him off the air. Not forcibly get him off the air, but, get together and start saying to people.
Okay, Mark, on that radio, there's a bunch of buttons that you can push that will actually find you different frequencies that are not Glenn Beck's show. It is your First Amendment right to punch those buttons on the radio to not listen to Glenn Beck, because when enough people stop listening to Glenn Beck, the corporation that owns the radio station will drop him.
I do, but the thing is this, I like to hear what the enemy has to say sometimes. And
as long as you listen to him. You can't have your Glenn Beck and silence him too. I'm sorry, it's not going to work that way. Listen, we got to let you go, Mark. We're coming up on a commercial break. We got a bunch of calls. Real quick, Tom in Minnesota, what's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. I was having, as Claire says, kind of I can't remember how she puts it, a slap on your head moment. I was thinking every month I get a bill from a utility company, and what's funny is we all get bills from the Federal Reserve. They're called $1 bills, $5 bills, $10 bills. Right in the definition of a bill is it's something you owe somebody else. Mm-hmm. And like any good Ponzi scheme, whoever ends up holding the paper at the end of the scheme is the one who's going to be the biggest loser.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, when the nation was started, the money, the actual money, the currency that supported commerce was silver and gold. And the paper notes, which is what they were called. They weren't called bills, they were called notes, or certificates. They were for convenience only. They weren't the money. They had no worth. But you could take those certificates into the bank and get the real money. And that's what made them very, very convenient. The Federal Reserve has issued the Federal Reserve note as a unit of debt. And when that bill is sitting in your wallet, it's still accruing interest to the bankers, which is why 100 years after the establishment of the Third Bank of the United States, otherwise known as the Fed, we are hopelessly in debt. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at an email that just came in over the break here talking about, again, Glenn Beck's show had Ted Cruz. And I'm reading verbatim from the email. Attempting a sympathy angle for votes by saying his American mother is a cancer survivor, and we Americans must support Americans who struggle to find cancer treatment that is available all over the globe, except for inside the USA. So let's be Americans together and support my mom, who is American, and we can be Americans together and together be cancer. And the first thing that occurs to me is how hard he's hitting. My mother's an American, my mother's an American, my mother's an American, because that assertion is in doubt. Yes, she was born in Delaware. But when she moved to Canada with Ted Cruz's father, and remember, they were not married at that time, they both became Canadian citizens because Ted Cruz's mother's name shows up on the voting rolls. And back when Ted Cruz was born, Canada did not recognize dual citizenship. It's one or the other. You're either going to be American or Canadian. And by virtue of the voter rolls, we know that at that time, Ted Cruz's mother had become Canadian. So I guess Ted is beginning to figure out that the jig is up on this whopper of a lie that he has been telling everybody his entire career. He is not a U.S. citizen by birth. He's not born in the U.S. He was actually an illegal immigrant for many of the years he first came here. And there's actually, somebody wrote an article the other day that Ted Cruz has renounced officially his Canadian citizenship. The legitimacy of his American citizenship is in doubt. He could be a man without a state running for the White House. Have you ever heard of anything so absurd? All right, let's grab ourselves some phone calls. Jesse in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, first off, I just want to say, in light of the shootings that happened, it's just a few miles down the road from about 50 miles with the people dying or being killed in their sleep last week. I started thinking, and I had to ask my AR-15 why it wanted to kill people. And it told me that it doesn't. It's a peaceful rifle. And even beyond that...
Boy, mine won't even talk to me. It just sits there. You know, when I was living in Washington State, I took one of the flintlocks I built, and I put it out there, and I just watched it. I had a security camera on it, waiting for it to kill somebody, and all it did was rust.
You know? Well, you're just not being nice enough to it, because mine was very vocal. And it also informed me that it doesn't even feel like an AR-15, Mike. It self-identifies as a single-shot bolt-action rifle. And it wants to be treated as such.
Yeah, actually, I have a pea shooter that actually self-identifies as a nuclear weapon. That's funny. That is very funny. Anything else, Jesse?
Well, yeah, I just went and got my ID renewed just about an hour ago. And I was in there talking to the lady. She was asking me all the questions. She wouldn't let me identify as a black female, though. But they did tell me when they were talking about citizenship and stuff, and I was like, well, can I say I'm not a citizen and get all these benefits and stuff? She's like, well, you can, but you're going to be required to bring in some paperwork and stuff. I was like, well, if I'm not a citizen, can I still go vote? She's like, well, sure. And
you don't need paperwork to become a non-citizen. Just walk into Mexico and then hop back over the fence and speak nothing but Spanish. They'll treat you like royalty.
I've been trying to, or I'm going to can you speak? See, I've already lost my ability to speak English.
Well, Jesse, together with that thing about your AR-15 actually talking to you, I have to say this, and I mean this as a friend. No matter how much of a hurry you are in the morning, you have to stop drying your hair in that microwave oven because it's beginning to have an effect.
Is that what the problem is?
That may be what the problem is. All right, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Al in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Good. Before I start, I just want to say maybe to all your listeners, they should really support you and donate because what you're doing is expensive and dangerous, and more people need to open their checkbooks and take care of you, Mike.
Well, I do appreciate that, and it is necessary, and it gets a little frustrating because the people who are attacking my website, they're well-funded. They've got all modern equipment, and we're here with leftover machines and trying to keep everything running. And it does get to me every once in a while. I'm in a much better mood today, though, but so everything's fine. But thank you for those kind words.
You're welcome. I just wanted to respond, first of all, to one of your callers that called in earlier. I did see on MSNBC last night they were going after that America First. They were trying to say that I think it was Lindbergh was using it, and he was a Nazi supporter. And it's, to me, it looks like it's just a desperate move to try and find some way to, make Trump look bad. But I think it was that Greta.
It does reveal how desperate they are. They can't find anything on him. That's more contemporary. And of course, meanwhile, our corporate media has absolutely turned away from Ted Cruz's sexual escapades. They won't even touch the question of whether Hillary was running an espionage operation out of the State Department. But by golly, we're going to go on out there and say that Donald Trump's America First attitude, that's Nazism, and we're slaves of Israel, and we're proud of it, and we are not going to let the nation change.
Yeah, it was pretty pathetic.
Yes.
But I was also calling because I have the perfect lady for the $20 bill.
Ah, who's that?
I just ran across her actually recently, Karen Hudis. I think that's how you
pronounce that. Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
Oh, my gosh. This woman is incredible. I don't know if any of your listeners should really go on YouTube and look her up. But
well, see, there's a little technicality. There's a little technicality. Under U.S. law, you cannot have your face on the currency. You cannot have a geographical feature named after you while you are still alive. Otherwise, I would have been putting forward, Claire to be on the $20 bill. I think she'd look really good on that $20 bill. But there's something you need to keep in mind. We're all being obsessed about the face on that bill, and it's to distract us from looking just above that face where it says Federal Reserve Note and wondering why it doesn't say silver certificate or gold certificate anymore. Because that is what we should really have our knickers in a twist about right now.
Yeah, this woman, I don't know if you've done any research on her, but I mean, she's at the tip of the spear against all these globalists, and they fired her, and she ended up suing them and winning, and she bought a.
I'm very familiar with her. I'm very, very familiar with her. Listen, I need to let you go. We got another caller waiting I want to get to before the commercial break, so we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I was watching the press conference with Carly Fiorina and Ted Cruz, and she said, "My fellow Americans," and then when she said it again, she goes, "My fellow citizens." So I think she could be more dangerous than Hillary.
Man, I'm sorry. You just, Carly is dangerous. They're all dangerous to an extent here, but Hillary is the master, and Carly is just a pathetic wannabe.
Hey, Mike, did you hear that China bought the Carlson hotels? They own Radisson hotel chain and
Well, good for them. They got money. You know why they've got money? Strong manufacturing. Healthy agriculture. The Wall Street has been operating on this theory for years that if you take a pile of money and shake it back and forth, it's magically going to grow. And it doesn't really. It grows in their hands, but that's because they're siphoning more out of our pocket. China deserves their wealth and prosperity because they do manufacture. They make products. They sell agriculture. That's a healthy economy, and that's peace through commerce. And the U.S. has lost its way, tragically. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we know that Hillary's victory in New York has a cloud hanging over it. Had all the Democratic voters who wanted to vote, especially in Brooklyn, where Bernie Sanders is from, if they had been allowed to vote, if they hadn't been blocked and disenfranchised, Sanders would have won New York. And a lot of people are wondering, why is he not seeking legal redress, which he should, unless he's being bribed with the vice presidency. Hillary's telling Bernie, I stole it from you fair and square, and you can make a big ruckus about it, or you can be vice president and pray for a meteor strike. Now, there's still this issue out there of the server. Judge Napolitano is out there saying he's 100% certain the FBI has enough evidence to convict Hillary. Yes, they do. They've got the one that we know is out in public, where Hillary instructed her subordinate, Jacob Sullivan, to remove the classification headers from a document and send it by non-secure means. It doesn't matter whether he did it. It doesn't matter what was inside the document. The issuing of the instruction is a felony violation of Title 18. And we're seeing Loretta Lynch out there saying, Hillary's selling out the U.S. secrets. It's not worth prosecuting, but we're going to get those global warming deniers. And you've got the head of the FBI out there saying, we're not in a rush here. We'll report on our investigation 3 or 4 years down the road after Hillary's president, and we can't do a thing about it. So my nickel is bet on Judicial Watch, which is pursuing information in a civil court, and I'm sure the judge in that case is getting a lot of late-night phone calls reminding him that, somebody has recordings of his late-night phone calls to Fifi's Phone Fantasies. But if anybody is going to nail Hillary before the November election, it's going to be Judicial Watch. But there is no question. Hillary Clinton has violated the Espionage Act because the Espionage Act allows for negligence espionage. You don't need to intend to take secrets and sell them to foreign power. If you take a classified document out of the secure area and you just leave it on the lunch counter, that's considered legally espionage by negligence. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, I've just received recently from a really reliable source, an unnamed government official, that Lockheed Martin is going to change its core business. And it's going to change to a fruit company. on the grounds that it supplied so many lemons to the military that it might as well change.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm having to respond to, we have some family friends who are dealing with a medical crisis. Would you repeat that last part again?
I said Lockheed Martin is going to change its core business to a fruit distribution company. The grounds that it supplied so many lemons to the U.S. military, it might as well...
It might as well open a lemonade stand, but it better not do it without the appropriate city permit, or they'll get slapped around like those kids on the sidewalk. Apple is doing so poorly with tablet and phone sales. They're diversifying into military sales. They're going to introduce the iBomb. Anything else?
Well, I was going to make mention of other things, but did you manage to watch that film?
No, I told you I wasn't going to get to it till this weekend. I'm just overwhelmed between the website, the radio show, getting ready for a major change over the weekend, supporting Claire's choir, and dealing with the relentless hacker attacks. I'm not even going to look at it till the weekend. So call me and nag me about it on Monday, okay?
Will do, and we'll keep up that little bet we had about Cyprus.
Yes, absolutely. We will definitely do that. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Michael in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Hey, I just don't know if you touched on this story. I'm just tuning in, but there was a CNBC article came out a few hours ago where it was talking with this Curly Hoagland. I guess he's an RNC committee member. And now he's stating that even if Trump gets the 1,237 delegate votes, that it means nothing because that they're not legal convention votes. So they're already prefacing it that even if he gets that 1,237, they're just going to throw it out, just saying that they're not bound delegates and they're going to kind of...
Well, we've been hearing that all along where they're saying that, the delegates coming in are under no obligation to vote for whoever won their state primary. And like I said, it's time to go along on tar, feathers, ropes, and rails and guillotines, because if the GOP is a victim of its own success. Back in 2008 and 2012, they succeeded in kicking out the People's Choice for a candidate, Ron Paul, and so now they think they can do it again with impunity. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think they understand there's going to be a problem because the police around that convention site, they are spending millions and millions of dollars on riot control equipment because they know there's going to be a lot of angry Americans who are going to want to go into that GOP leadership. If they don't get Donald Trump, we need to save the trees because we're going to need them to hang some politicians.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's all I got for you today, Mike. Have a great day.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton, and again, we have a precedent that justifies asking if Hillary Clinton was selling secrets to foreign governments through her weak email server and collecting and laundering the payments through her foundation, because they did it back in 1996, the Chinagate scandal. So there's an article over in the Washington Times asking if Bill Clinton and his team, the key to the FBI's Hillary investigation, because now they're looking at the overlaps. And the overlaps are focused on an individual, Justin Cooper, who sort of flits back and forth between Bill and Hillary Clinton. And he's in there in the formation of the foundation. This could be the guy who knows really the cash flow and information flow. There's definitely a there. And I keep asking this question. Was Hillary replaying Chinagate? Nobody in the establishment media will touch this, even to ridicule it and say, what a nonsensical idea, suspecting a serving Secretary of State of betraying her country and selling secrets of her. What a ridiculous idea. Betrayal by high officials, that's a historical reality. Remember a guy named Benedict Arnold? Now, as I mentioned earlier, Hillary Clinton is getting ready to head off to Tel Aviv for a fundraiser. And you're probably asking, how can a U.S. presidential candidate be receiving money from foreign sources. But here's where you get the nudge, nudge, wink, wink, because this fundraiser in Tel Aviv, they have a couple of American citizens who happen to be from Israel, but they're U.S. citizens. So all the Israelis are going to give huge amounts of money to these Israeli American citizens who will then turn around and give it to Hillary Clinton, which technically makes it legal. But we know where the money is coming from. Israel wants to buy, once again, the U.S. government so that you are enslaved to Israel's purposes, and Hillary Clinton is out there with the red light hanging over her head and the change machine on her belt saying, yes, I am for sale. Now, interesting little article. This came out of RIMP.com, reminding everybody that Bernie Sanders' Rhode Island win should be an opportunity for the Democratic Party to reflect if they want to go on betting all of their eggs on Hillary, knowing that if Judicial Watch finds anything indictable, she is toast. And the fact that the Democratic Party supported her will taint them as well for decades to come. Look how long it took the GOP to recover from Nixon. So there's a little warning. We got to take a break for top of the hour news and commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let me just take care of something there. Back to battery, as it were. Okay, we have got a phone caller. Been waiting for a long time over the break. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Thank you for your patience. What's on your mind?
I often hear people speculating about where the next false flag might come from. And it seems to me that the revolution will be televised, and it has been scheduled. It's called the RNC Convention in July 18th to 21st in Cleveland. It seems to me that unless, I think it would be good to turn a lot of attention to the manipulations of Soros. I think Boehner's wrong. Cruz isn't the devil incarnate. Soros may be, or Brzezinski, Kissinger, people like that. But if people keep
by the way, we just got an email from Satan saying, stop insulting me by equating me with these people. I'm not that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, here's the problem. Yes, we're all expecting there to be riots at the Republican National Convention because they're telegraphing the fact that they're going to flip the finger at the Republican voters and put in one of their own cronies to be the nominee, and that is going to trigger violence at the convention site. But violence in a single city is not going to be accepted as justification for nationwide martial law by the American people. But if the economy implodes and there are food riots all over, then Obama has his excuse to invoke these various FEMA emergency presidential orders, including the one that allows him to just cancel the elections outright.
Right, exactly. There is multi-layered possibilities, each of which gets worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
The ante is up with each one. And I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and we have the Democratic Convention here. Now, that doesn't promise to be quite so volatile, because Soros wouldn't be involved with inciting, for that one. Now, some Bernie supporters might be indignant and protest, but I don't think they're likely to be violent, per se.
No, the only violent Bernie Sanders protesters are the ones attacking Trump's convention, and they're not even Bernie Sanders supporters.
Exactly. So, hopefully things will be relatively peaceful here, but there have been bellicose statements a few months ago by Black Lives Matter leaders that said if Trump were made the nominee, then they would riot too. So, and that's being fomented undoubtedly. So we have the possible specter of race relations, divisions, and racial, discord.
Let me insert one more possibility in there as well, and that is that before the Democratic Convention, Judicial Watch comes out with something that is absolutely indictable for Hillary Clinton and her email scandal. And let's say that she goes into a brokered convention, or the Democratic leadership is just saying she can't run. Hillary's people will then riot. I mean, this is going to be a very violent election year. We could even see riots around the general election in November.
Right. And Roger Stone says that Hillary's forces may come out jangling some skeletons from Trump's closet, too, at the last minute with a mudslinging. So that was why the most vitriolic rhetoric and accusations coming out last minute as well.
I think if there were any really juicy skeletons in Donald Trump's closet, Ted Cruz would have been rattling them long before now. That's why they're going back to this thing about, oh, he's waving his right hand, he's the ghost of Adolf Hitler, which is pretty desperate and pathetic.
People used to salute the American flag that way.
That's exactly, you're exactly right. When this whole nonsense about, Trump's rallies were looking like, the Nuremberg rallies because everybody was raising their hand, we pulled all these photos together. American kids doing the Nazi salute to pledge to the American flag. We found a Jewish group in Israel that uses that salute. I mean, it's absolutely absurd how desperate they are to try and find anything they can say about Donald Trump. Remember early in the campaign they were saying, oh, that's not even his real hair. He's wearing a toupee. And then, of course, he had somebody come up and tug on it, and, it didn't come off. Maybe implants. I don't even care. It's absolutely irrelevant. But when you have these politicians who cannot argue against Trump on the issues, of course, they're going to resort to calling him names. Because when Trump first started on this campaign and he said, we've got to have secure borders, and everybody on the establishment was saying, oh, you can't say that, you're being heartless, we have to have open borders. And then all of a sudden the polls were showing the American people were, 90% on board. Yes, we've got to stop this flooding of our nation with illegal immigrants, many of whom are criminal and contagious, and these refugees as well. We don't have enough jobs for the American people. We have a right to protect our borders. And so the establishment has had to sort of back away from that a little bit because Trump is out there espousing what the American people really want and how they feel about it. He's not just part of this cabal that's just trying to sell another lemon to the American people. And it worked up until now because election after election, if all the candidates are out there saying we have to rub blue mud in our navel and we don't have a choice for anybody else, we all wind up with blue mud in our navel. Now all of a sudden we have an alternative candidate, somebody who doesn't want to open the borders, somebody who wants to bring back manufacturing. And that betrays just how weak the political agenda of the establishment has been, because people are just abandoning it and saying, yeah, let's make America great again. Let's recapture our technology lead. Let's bring back good education instead of indoctrination. Let's restore our manufacturing and have healthy, natural, organic agriculture.
Good. Absolutely. Very good stuff. But, we heard it here first. Mike Rivero said that Donald Trump might have implants, but they look like normal implants.
Was only a theory, but again, it's irrelevant. Does it really matter? I mean, it never used to. Go back and look at the portraits of some of our earlier presidents. They're ugly people.
Right.
Okay, it didn't matter because back then we were a nation of ideas. And it's only been since, Nixon, Kennedy that all of a sudden everybody said, oh, if we just put enough makeup and beautiful clothes on them, we can sell them anybody. Remember that big stink with Sarah Palin? They literally rented something like $250,000 worth of high-end clothing for her to wear on the campaign trail with John McCain. And then was she angry when she found out she had to give it all back?
Oh, man. Poor baby.
Poor baby.
So, all right, Mike. Thank you. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Same to you. Thank you very much here. Now, out in California, a lot of people are very upset over the fact that Governor Jerry Brown has signed Assembly Bill 1461, the new Motor Voter Act, which automatically registers people to vote when you get your driver's license through the DMV. Now, California allows illegal immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. And under this new Assembly bill, these illegal immigrants are now registered to vote in a state that does not allow checking of IDs and citizenship when you get to the polling places. Now, contrast that with what happened in New York, where there were all these paperwork shuffles that prevented legal American citizens who have a right to vote not to vote. They were prevented. They were blocked. They were dropped from the rolls. Do you see what's going on here? Illegal immigrants, oh yeah, come on in. We'll let you vote. Because we know you're going to vote Democratic. and legal American citizens who aren't voting the way they're being told to are being systematically blocked and excluded. Has it ever been more obvious what's going on? And the polls are now showing the majority of Americans now view this whole political system as clearly rigged to keep the outsiders out, to keep the people disenfranchised, to keep the little tyrannical fascist clique in place. If there is violence at the Republican National Committee, it could spread. We're seeing so many nations around the world on the edge of a bloody revolution, and I would hate to see one happen here because the wrong people get killed in these things. But it almost feels like our corrupted central government is not going to back off until they actually trigger a revolution in the streets of America, for which they should be held accountable. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to the political news. A lot of people were very angered by this dirty trick, which apparently was the product of this new bought and paid for cadre of internet trolls. They're funded with roughly $1 million. They're funded by a PAC, which because of a loophole in the law is allowed to actively coordinate with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And Tuesday, going into those primaries, Bernie Sanders' Facebook pages were all loaded up with porn images, which resulted in Facebook taking them down at a time when Bernie Sanders needed them to coordinate his campaign and encourage people to get out there. They like to play dirty. Well, Facebook basically put the pages back up once the porn was deleted, but we're seeing this article over here in IntelliHub pointing out that there is a clear, continuous pattern of Facebook censoring pro-Trump posts and any negative Hillary news. So Facebook can't be trusted to be objective about anything anymore. Alrighty, over in Europe, the EU is struggling to maintain legitimacy, or it's struggling just to look good anymore. But there's an article coming out of Investment Watch blog. The EU nations pen a plot for complete federalization of Europe. In other words, they want to take the European Union from being a coalition of separate states into being a single central government, which is what happened here in the United States of America, because this country was started as a coalition of independent states. That's why it's called the United States of America, rather than the United State of America. But over time, it became federalized into a single central government, and that's what they're trying to do with the European Union, before any more of those countries get the uppity idea of breaking off and going their own way. Now, Dick Black, who's a part-time state senator in Virginia, and by the way, I think that's a good idea. When this nation was started, being in the government was a part-time occupation. You were expected to have a real job on which you lived, and then you would go over to the legislature every once in a while to do the state's business or the nation's business. We were never intended to have a permanent ruling class. But I digress. Apparently Dick Black is over there in Syria. He met Bashar al-Assad and is saying basically it is now time to reevaluate the U.S. agenda in Syria, and that it would be very beneficial for the U.S. government to speak directly to Syria's President Assad. Of course, up until now, the attitude of Washington, D.C. is, he's got to be gone. Get rid of him. We're going to put our own government in Syria. And we're now looking at 5 years. They've been trying to do this. Not exactly a stunning success of U.S. foreign policy. Worse, it has brought us to the edge of direct conflict with the Russians, and I don't think we want to do that. Now, the U.S. is still whining over the Russian success against the U.S.-backed terrorist groups in Syria. They are all but gone. And the U.S. is screaming that, there's now a Russian Navy base on the Syrian coast. And the Russians are saying, doesn't matter what happens to Syria, that base is going to remain. That'll be a warm water port for Russian naval vessels. And that's exactly the opposite of what the U.S. wanted. In fact, they were hoping, following the Kiev coup d'etat, that Crimea would kick out the Russian Navy bases there, which would deny Russia a warm water seaport at all. Anytime Russia wanted to send ships down to warm waters, they'd have to go around from the north of the Russian continent or the Asian continent. Come down that way. Nope. Crimea still has Russian ports, and now so does Syria. So does Cyprus. That's why Victoria Nuland is over there saying, you will cut your ties with Russia. You will have Turkish troops on your soil. You will do what we tell you to do, or bad things will happen to you. You don't do what we tell you in Washington, D.C., we're going to have the fixers come over and make bad things happen to you. That's the U.S. foreign policy right there. The mafia thugs going into the stores and the bar and say, you got to have our sticker on the window or you're going to burn down. Lightning going to strike you. Now, there was a very touching gesture the other day. There's a retired French couple, Jean-Claude and Micheline Magou, who had offered their own military decorations, their family's military decorations, to the family of Alexander Prochorenko, who died in Syria under very heroic circumstances. And they thought it was just symbolic. They were going to show their approval and their sympathy, and they sent the medals over. I can imagine they were somewhat surprised, following that gesture, to receive an invitation from Putin to the Victory Day celebration in Moscow, which is a big deal. It's the biggest parade they have. So sometimes nice gestures do come back. Over in Armenia, new protests. Oh, my goodness, the Armenian people want their government to go. And guess who's behind the scenes? The same U.S.-backed non-governmental organizations and operatives that we saw in Kiev. And what a wonderful, resounding foreign policy success that turned out to be. They're still playing the same games. Wasn't it Einstein who once said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it's going to have a different outcome? That old tactic left over from the end of World War II of covert overthrow of a country, installing a puppet government, doesn't work anymore. It's like a magician's magic trick. Once the public knows how it's being done, it simply doesn't work any longer, and nobody in Washington, D.C. has picked up on that. They've got all these quagmires all over from these covert overthrows, and they're still up to the same games. Now they're trying to do it in Armenia. I hope the Armenian people just kick all these troublemakers out. It's time for this kind of nonsense to come to an end, because it is leading us closer and closer to a hot third world war, which will end with nuclear weapons. The U.S. cannot defeat Russia and or China in a conventional war. Once they're decisively engaged, it's going to end with the U.S. using their nuclear arsenal. And even then, they're still probably going to lose. Okay, we got a caller just came online, but we got a commercial break coming up. So, Larry, I'm going to leave you until after we come back from the commercial break. Apparently, Yatsenyuk, former Ukrainian prime minister, is now in Argentina. There was talk he was going to Canada. Nope, he's down there in Argentina, hanging out with the other ancient old Nazis. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right to the telephones here to Larry in New York. Larry, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I've been listening for a long time, never called in, but you had a caller earlier talking about the Karen Hudas.
Yes.
And from the World Bank. That story of hers, she would be a great guest for you. Her story really needs to be heard.
Well, I think we looked at it once before, but it didn't happen, and I'll take another look at that. Okay?
Maybe you can link to her videos or something. That would be great for your audience.
Well, I need to go out and look at the videos and see if they make sense or not before I do that. You know, I do try and take some care that I don't link to certain things. I had somebody just earlier today trying to get me to link to a new conference on 9/11, but it's being pushed by the people who are still out there selling that there was no plane at the Pentagon. So no, they don't get a link. And anyway, thank you for the advice and information and suggestion. I'm going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the international scene. As you know, Netanyahu came on out declaring that Israel now owns the Golan Heights, including that massive oil and gas find that's just been found there, saying that the Golan was a part of Israel going back to ancient times, which is complete and utter nonsense. Israel didn't exist until after World War II. Before that, it was called Palestine and Syria and so forth. And one of the big lies coming out of Israel is that they've always been there. No, they have not. Golda Meir used to say there's no place to, there's no Palestine to give back to the Palestinians. There never was a Palestine. It never existed. And, of course, we have an article, Israel and Palestine, the maps tell the story, which not only show Israel's continued chipping away of Palestine, but all of these historical documentation that, yes, there was a Palestine. Maps that go back to the Middle Ages, Lumiere Brothers motion pictures, and on and on. And I have received from many of our listeners these Palestinian coins. And I have now a very large collection of Palestinian coins from 1920 through 1940, proving that, yes, there was a government in Palestine that was issuing their money. So now Netanyahu comes out with the new big lie, that the Golan Heights has been a part of Israel since ancient times, even though Israel itself has not existed from ancient times to now. And we're not even sure how much of it really existed back then. There's no archaeological evidence that supports the stories in the Old Testament or the Torah. You go to any other nation in the Middle East, you can't take 3 steps without tripping over the artifacts of their ancient heritage. So anyway, the United Nations reminded Israel that there's already a standing United Nations Security Council resolution declaring Israel's attempts to grab other countries null and void under international law, which doesn't mean Israel isn't going to try and do it anyway. But now, Syria is saying that it is time to force Israel to give the Golan Heights back to its rightful owners, Syria. And that could trigger a war, because Israel's attitude is, we stole it fair and square, and we will defend our stolen loot with force of arms, especially when it's got that much oil and gas underneath it. We can't let Syria have oil and gas. They'll turn it to terroristic purposes. They'll make weapons with it. And so forth and so on. Now, there's a cautionary note that came out of GizaDeathStar.com. And you need to pay attention. Basically, there are now top U.S. military experts who are saying that during the 13 years that the U.S. has been grinding down their own stockpiles, waging war on 17 different countries, with weapons that are basically from the last century, Russia, and to a lesser extent China, have embarked on programs of modernization to the point now where our own top military experts are acknowledging that U.S. weapons are now technologically inferior to Russia, something that was hammered home during Russia's campaign in Syria. And they make an interesting parallel, because for anybody considering joining the military, you might want to think about it. They go back to 100 years ago, World War I, big mistake number 1, before they were smart enough to realize they had to issue numbers. They called it the Great War. And they're talking about trench warfare, where the French were using military tactics that dated back to Napoleon. Long lines of soldiers marching forward in ranks into the crossed fire of German machine guns. The slaughter was immense. And France's attitude at that time is, the courage and bravery and fortitude of our men will prevail over the enemy's superior weapons. And it didn't work out. The tide was not turned against Germany until they adopted new tactics that recognized the superiority of the German weapons. And now we're seeing alarming talk coming out of our own politicians saying it doesn't matter if China and Russia's weapons are superior. We have soldiers who are dedicated and driven and courageous, and they will march into a buzzsaw willingly if we order them to do that. No, they won't, in point of fact. Nobody's that stupid. Now, remember we talked about The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And for anybody involved in the military, it is mandatory reading. Right in the very beginning, it lists 7 things that a ruler must have in order to win a war. 2 of them apply here. You must have a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight and die if necessary in it. And you must have a general population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the sacrifices and losses war brings even to the victorious side. The U.S. government has neither of those. Our military and our citizenry understand these are nothing but wars of conquest based on lies and hoaxes and fraud. And so I'm going to stress one more time. I'm opposed to war in general. I'm opposed to the current war because the United States is going to lose it, even if they use nuclear weapons. We have our own military people out there saying we've lost the technological edge to Russia. And then here's this really bizarre story that just came out of Sputnik News. Despite all the problems, the U.S. Marines have officially accepted the F-35 aircraft as is, faulty software and all. And they're going to send those airplanes off and say the courage and fortitude of our pilots will overcome the physical and software shortcomings. No, they won't. When a plane self-immolates, it doesn't matter how brave the pilot is or is not. It's boneheaded thinking. It is as flawed as the thinking in World War I. It seems that our military establishment doesn't learn from past mistakes or history. They just dream of glory and medals and decoration and more money for shiny weapons and stuff. It's amazing. Another reminder that Russia's technology is formidable, as apparently there was a little bit of a stink reported by Russia Today. There was a U.S. spy plane flying near Kamchatka, and a Russian Air Force MiG-31 jet, very, very capable aircraft, flew out, caught up with the spy plane, flew within 15 meters of the aircraft. Washington, D.C. is saying, well, it's no big deal. But apparently the spy plane did not get to where it thought it was supposed to go. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the foolhardy approach of the U.S. government wanting to go to war against Russia and China in order to remove the yuan and ruble as a threat to the U.S. dollar. Because the U.S. is not the world's sole superpower, and point of fact, its status as a superpower may be as much of a bluff as the unemployment numbers when you look at the poor performance of America's latest generation of weapons. The F-35, huge list of problems. F-22 still asphyxiating its pilots. Turns out it's not stealthy. When the U.S. flew some F-22s along the border with North Korea to send a message, they got a message from China saying, you do know those things are showing up on radar, right? Because as it turns out, stealth only works with a specific range of radar frequencies. Most modern air search targeting radars are very high frequency, and the stealthy aircraft are designed to exploit that. But if you go back to a good old-fashioned VHF air search scan radar, the planes are showing up. China has just successfully tested their nuclear-capable hypersonic missile. Had a successful test. And this was just days after a hypersonic glider was successfully tested up in Russia. Now, as far as North Korea, who we're being told is this big evil booga-booga we should be afraid of, especially in Alaska and here in Hawaii, apparently their latest test of an intermediate-range missile exploded right off the launch pad, so we're not too worried about that. China has issued a statement. They will not allow war on the Korean Peninsula. And China is declaring its full compliance with the UN Security Council resolution on North Korea. China is sending a message to North Korea. If you start a war, do not count on us to help you or support you or interfere at all. You're on your own. You're going to make your own bowl of kimchi and you're going to lie in it on this one, trying to calm things down. China is doing this because China understands that what the U.S. is looking for is a backdoor to a war with China. That if they get into a war with North Korea, China will come on in and they'll have to help the North Koreans, and then we'll have the opening to war with China and get rid of that gosh darn gold-backed yuan that is such a threat to the U.S. paper currency. Story coming out of military.com, the House panel has approved a measure that will require women in America to register for the draft. It's not just your sons, it is your daughters they are coming for their wars of conquest. And this, to me, suggests they know they're losing the war. Now, I'm sure they're going to come on out and say, well, this is what the feminists wanted. They wanted equal footing with men, and if we're going to kill and cripple a bunch of men, we're going to kill and cripple a bunch of women. But, and I know I'm going to get nasty letters for this one, wise rulers are always looking past the war. Too many leaders in history. It's win the war, and that's all we think about. And what happens afterward, I don't care. It's not my problem. Depleted uranium, not going to worry about it. Chemical weapon contamination leaking out of the barrels, not my problem. I'm just here to win the war, and then I'm retiring. But once the war is over, and there's a winner and a loser, and the winner is the private central bankers, and the loser is pretty much everybody else, that nation most able to quickly rebuild their population will be the nation that succeeds economically. And this whole self-identification, gender bias, restroom nonsense aside, there are men biologically, and there are women biologically. A man's contribution to the process of producing the next generation is measured in minutes. For the women, it is 9 months. And all models of population dynamics track the female population for that reason. The men come and go. When you put women at risk in combat, and they are killed in large measure, you have destroyed your ability to recover from the war economically after it's over. So it is a bad idea. It's got nothing to do with saying women are inferior. They're valuable. And it's time to go back to recognizing that. Turning to the economic news here, bad day on the Japanese stock market yesterday. Kind of a rough one here on our American markets. There's another article here down from ZeroHedge.com reiterating something that I have been saying under the scam of private central banking. Debt grows faster than available money supply. This article is saying that growth is accelerating. Debt is growing faster than cash flow by the most ever on record. They're just pouring out newly created money, ramping up the debt. Most of it's being used to fund stock buybacks for corporations to pull themselves out of the stock market before it starts coming unglued. The only ones who are going to face really serious, drastic losses are you, the little people, because that's your role in our society, to bear the losses. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. More than half of all U.S. adults under the age of 30 now reject capitalism. This is a false dichotomy because if they're under the age of 30, what they think is capitalism has been fascism. They're not old enough to have known real capitalism at all. The definitions keep we live under fascism, but they keep saying, oh, it's capitalist. We're a Western capitalist nation. Things are great. No, things are terrible because we stopped being capitalist decades ago and went into being fascistic. The rich keep their wealth. The poor are made to pay for all the losses. That is fascism. Benito Mussolini said fascism ought to be more properly called corporatism because it is the alignment of government power and corporate interests together aligned against the general population. The general population are reduced to a herd of livestock to be exploited and profited from. Sports Authority is throwing in the towel. They're closing all of their stores. They're now going to be gone, all of those people out of work. And there's another alarming article at Investment Watch blog. The indications are out. There's going to be another major economic whoopsie. And the average American household hasn't recovered from the last one. We're not as resilient. The damage is going to be far, far worse. A lot of Americans were caught off guard by the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud, but they still had savings. They still had some credit resilience. They still had some assets. They haven't recovered because every time any asset of any value is cut loose, it's been sucked up by the money junkies since 2008. And ordinary Americans are just running right on the edge. The next financial hiccup is going to result in a major homeless problem, or food riots, water riots. You've seen how people attack each other at the local big box store during Black Friday, trying to get a CD player or a purse that's on sale. How do you think these same people are going to be behaving when the food and water runs out? The water's already running out up in Detroit. That's why the Army has been training for the zombie apocalypse, because zombie is a military code word for really angry, pissed off, rioting American citizen. Over in France, their assembly has adopted a resolution calling to end all anti-Russian sanctions imposed by the European Union. That issue is also fueling the Frexit, because France really suffered from that Russian embargo. Russia bought a lot of products from France. Agriculture, wine, cheese. The French farmers were literally dumping it, rotting in front of the French government buildings because they couldn't find any markets for it. It's all breaking apart. They can't get it to work. Why? Sloppy analysis. The road to the dark infernal regions is paved with good intentions and littered with sloppy analysis, and that's exactly where we are right now. We got to take a break for our top of the hour commercials and news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3 here. And before we go any further, I'm looking at this email. This is following up on that incident at a Baltimore TV station where an individual went in and said they have a bomb, and they were shot. And it got kind of crazy. So this is the email I just got. I'm watching WBAL talking about the story I first saw on your site. I'll try and send you links as I find them. WBAL anchor says Fox 45 will need to beef up security after this. Another anchor makes comment, the suspect, was wearing hedgehog onesie, a big costume with a front zipper and ears on the costume. The outfit was apparently made famous in the Kardashians' show. Your comment was prescient. Scary. Bomb vest was actually candy bars wrapped in aluminum foil. Guy was shot in the leg by the sniper. Had a flash drive, wanted to put a story on Fox News, mentioned the Panama Papers, said he had evidence of vote fraud from Tuesday. Police presence was overwhelming. Pictures from helicopter of 50 vehicles and so forth and so on. And again, prescription antidepressants? Maybe. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Scott in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing there? Aloha.
Aloha.
Hey, Mike, you know what, Mikey? I wanted to talk to you about a situation with nature, and we were talking about this in the past. I watched a documentary on YouTube that really startled me about a week ago that happened, I believe, on March 24th and 25th, with something that's bigger than all the nuclear weapons in the world, and that is Yellowstone Park super volcano.
Yes.
Mikey, I drove around that a few years ago. I think I talked to you about this road that goes around that thing. 15.4 miles that road went around because I measured it on the odometer. What startled me, Mikey, was they were saying that the river that was going into it was starting to bubble. And this is the first time ever they have seen this.
Well, no, let me back up here just a little bit, because we were reporting on this just yesterday, where one of the rivers near Yellowstone was starting to have geothermal activity, except they noted that it was active more than 100 years ago, then it kind of gone quiet. Then it started back up again. So we all know that Yellowstone is going to let loose at some point. Unfortunately, because the last known supervolcano eruption happened back in the 1800s, we don't really know what we should be looking for to tell if an eruption is imminent. We all presume that there'll be an increase in seismicity and venting, but it could just pop the way a champagne bottle does. We don't really know yet. But there are a lot of supervolcanoes on Earth. Yellowstone is definitely the biggest, because supervolcanoes don't have a volcanic cone above them because the caldera has collapsed. They're actually hard to see. I was watching this series, What on Earth, which spots interesting things from satellite data, and they tend to sensationalize, and then they'll say, actually what it means is this, and they'll give you the real explanation. They were showing how space-based radar has indicated that there is a supervolcano at the southern end of Italy. We know that there's the remains of the Toba supervolcano down in Indonesia. The volcano Mount Aso, that rumbled a little bit following their earthquakes, is considered a supervolcano. What defines a supervolcano is not only its size, but the gas content in the lava. Because if you have a high dissolved gas content, it's going to fizz up out of control, like taking a warm soda pop and flipping off the bottle top after giving it a good shake. Not all volcanoes are like that. Here in Hawaii, we are a hotspot volcano, not a subduction zone volcano, and our lava is very loose and thin with very little dissolved gas in it. So it tends to just sort of hump up over the rim and flow on down, and we don't get the huge explosions that you would see in the stratovolcanoes like Krakatoa. So, eventually Yellowstone is going to blow. We don't know when. And at this point, you know, I do have all these websites I link to about seismic indications, and it doesn't look like it's going to cut loose immediately. But again, we don't have an experimental basis to know. We've never had the opportunity to have tilt meters and seismometers and GPS location sensors on an active volcano leading up to a supervolcano eruption. We did have some earlier instrumentation on Mount St. Helens, which gives us some indication. They did know it was going to erupt before it did erupt. They didn't know exactly when. Some people were unfortunately, tragically caught by surprise on that.
Yeah, Mikey, great knowledge. But Mikey, I wanted to say this. There's different categories when they do blow, and they were saying if it's a category 8, that listen to this, it would leave 1,000 miles of the ash 10 feet deep.
Yes.
And that's just something. And they were saying that baby blows, it would be like 50 times bigger than that the other one you were talking about. But here's the thing: what is so dangerous is the ash that goes up in the atmosphere. That if you breathe that in, your lungs will turn to cement and you're cooked. So, Michael, thank you for that knowledge. But we always remember they can send off all the nukes around the world. But if you have one of those super mega volcanoes go off, that baby would just destroy the whole planet. So thank you for taking my call, Michael, and aloha.
Okay, aloha. We're going to let you go. Now, little point of clarification. Yellowstone has erupted before. In fact, if you start at Yellowstone Lake and you start looking at the topography heading off to the southwest, you are going to see the remnant of caldera after caldera after caldera. It's erupted many times in the past. And the Earth is still here, and we're still here. It will be an absolute cataclysm. And it could be close to an extinction level event. DNA studies have shown that the human population was pared down to less than 8,000 at some point in its history. That seems to possibly correspond with the last known eruption of the Toba supervolcano. So it would be serious stuff. And he's right about the ash. Most people, when they hear the term volcanic ash, they think ash like they'd see on the end of a cigarette or after burning newspapers or wood in their fireplace. It's completely different. Volcanic ash is microscopically powdered glass. And you do not want it in your body. You don't want it in your lungs. And you have to be very careful about it piling up on the roof of your house. Because you'll see it pile up, and it starts to look like your house has been hit with gray snow. But it's several times heavier, and it will collapse your roof. So, again, my best read, and I did come out of a geological background when I was working with NASA. There's no reason to think it's going to erupt imminently, but it's always a good idea to be prepared for any disaster, whether it's a tsunami, a hurricane, volcano, government going completely wacko, earthquakes, all the rest of it. Always, there should be some degree of preparedness to, evacuate to a safe place. All right, we're going to grab one more phone call from Frank in London. Aloha. I'm going to have to take you through the next commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Yeah, how anti-Semitism now is redefined as criticizing Zionism historically, or saying something negative about Israel. I don't know if you know today, if you heard on the news today about Ken Livingstone made a statement about the Nazis and the Zionists collaborated during World War II, and he was almost physically attacked for it. And he asked people,
He's historically correct. He's historically correct. And what an age where truth is now a crime. We got to take a break for commercials. Frank, stay on the line. I'm gonna come right back to you. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there is a saying that when you live under a government that lies, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And we do seem to be living in an age where truth is not valued anymore. Maintenance of the official lies has become the law of the land. I remember when Ernst Zundel was in court, the judge literally said, even if everything you are saying is 100% true, it is still against the law to say it. The fact that Ernst was telling the truth was not a defense. And he went to jail. Now, in this case, our parliamentarian is absolutely right. Early on, the Nazis and the Zionists were aligned. And I just posted up an article about this, where Hitler offered the Zionists Madagascar as a new homeland, which is a really nice place. It's a lot nicer than all the dirt and the dust at the eastern end of the Mediterranean. But the Zionists stood firm and said, we want Palestine. And the Nazis supported the Zionists in their quest to have Palestine. They issued a commemorative medal about it. Unfortunately, this happy occurrence happened in 1933, at the same time where Germany kicked out the private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I and issued their new value-based currency that didn't have to be borrowed from a private central bank, triggering the German economic miracle, at which point the Zionists turned on Hitler and tried to organize a global boycott to destroy Germany's newly emergent economy, because by golly, you will not live free from a private central bank. And that's what led to the hostility and led to World War II. That's the reality. And unfortunately, go ahead and speak your piece.
Yes, well, I've definitely heard Ken Livingstone simply asking them to refute what he just said, and all you can hear, you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Semitic. There's, all these talking heads. That's all I was hearing. Like, it's just a natural default. So anytime somebody go into history and repeat a historical fact.
Well, let me tell you how absurd that really is. Okay, I just went on in. I'm talking about the Nazis and their atrocities and their successes and their failures. Nobody's calling me up to scream that I'm being anti-German, are they? Oh, you anti-Aryan, how dare you talk about Hitler and, you only criticize Hitler because you hate the German people. I mean, that's how absurd it is. And you almost, when you see this kind of hysterical reaction, you begin to understand the sense of panic. Because this is one of the biggest, greatest lies in modern history, and it's coming unglued. And everybody whose reputation and power and fortune and authority was resting on that lie understands they're under direct threat. People don't like being lied to. And when it's finally been forced on them that they have been lied to, the degree they've been lied to, public support for the government that lied to them on such a scale is going to vanish immediately.
And I think that's what's happening. I can see the desperation in these people now. And I believe it's coming apart.
It is coming apart. Time makes ancient truth uncouth. No massive lie has ever survived the test of time. They always come out eventually. The donation of Constantine, the 7 cities of gold, all of these things. We look back and say, oh, those people, how could they have been so foolish as to believe such utter and complete nonsense? And I'm sure 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, how could the people of the 20th century have been so foolish as to believe all that Holocaust nonsense? What a bunch of goofballs they were. The evidence that they were being lied to was right in front of them. Well, anybody who pointed to the evidence was being thrown in prison. By the most holy Inquisition, we will enforce the beliefs on you, and we'll slap Galileo around, and Ernst Zundel, and all the rest of that.
Oh yes. Well, they may want to try and work that one out with the guy from the sky coming down to save us all.
Yeah. It is amazing. It is amazing. We like to think of ourselves as an advanced, enlightened civilization, and we're not. Yeah, we've got more interesting technology right now, but overall, our civilization doesn't really seem to have evolved all that much from the Middle Ages. In fact, it seems like we've taken a step back from the Renaissance.
Oh, yeah, I think we have. I think maybe the advancement of technology has tricked us into thinking that we've advanced. But if you look at the way we behave towards each other, I think we're in a state of some sort of regression in that way.
I agree. I agree. We're being dragged away from the age of enlightenment back to the age of darkness, where we're simply told what we must believe. Humans are warming the earth. There's a big bang that proves God exists. And don't clutter up the issue with quantized redshifts and actual thermometers. I mean, you're a heretic. Burn them at the stake. Burn them at the stake. And it is. I was often talking, years ago about with the fall of the American Empire, of seeing the world slide back into a new dark ages, and it seems to be happening already. Truth and intellectualism and rationality and logic are looked down on now as inferior, as opposed to fanatical belief in a political agenda. And it is.
Mike, you are correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry to see that, definitely. All right, well, listen, Frank, thank you for the input. We're going to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got a bunch of stuff to cover here. Strikes across Europe as angry workers respond to harsh austerity cuts. Because every time you are enslaved to a private central bank, sooner or later there'll be austerity, which is private central banks speak for, you must make do with less and give us more. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. We own the world. You are our slaves. You are our serfs. This is your life. Get used to it. Over in Great Britain, used to think of Great Britain as a great nation. It's even in the name. It's part of the advertising. Apparently there are over 1.25 million British subjects who are living lives considered destitute. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough clothes. They didn't have enough heating going through this brutal winter we're all supposed to pretend didn't happen. They don't have the basic life necessities. over in Ukraine, the IMF has come on in with more aid to keep Kiev afloat. The price will be that the gas bills for Ukrainian citizens are going to be doubled. So they can take that money and give it to the bankers. And there's the music. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And quick update on the situation over in Baltimore. This is an update coming from WUSA 9. Basically, this man in his 20s walked into a television station in Baltimore dressed in an outfit described as a panda onesie, claiming to have an explosive strapped to his chest. Was demanding to put the contents of a flash drive on the TV, which was refused. They're not saying what was on the flash drive, but apparently the police snipers shot this guy, and because he wouldn't take his hand out of the pocket of the panda outfit, they basically let him lie there for 30 minutes while the robot went over and poked and prodded. Turned out the explosive was just a bunch of candy bars wrapped in tin foil or aluminum foil. Not also being talked about is whether this guy was on prescription antidepressants, because frankly, I can't think of any reason for this guy to do this and get himself shot in the process. Fake bomb? Maybe. Getting something forced onto TV? Not so much in the age of the internet. You don't need to go into a corporate media outlet and get something broadcast. Put it on YouTube. You'll get a bigger audience anyway. Was this a desperate attempt by the TV station to build publicity and ratings? Couldn't rule that one out. Back to the economy. Venezuela's inflation has hit 720% per annum. Maduro is basically operating as a dictator, trying to hold everything together. That'll teach them to sell their oil for currencies other than the dollar. Venezuela is in such trouble they've run out of the money needed to print new money. They can't even afford to support the hyperinflation. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, President Obama went on over there and he said, demanded Britain stay in the EU. You will stay there. Terrible things will happen if you dare fight for your independence. And, of course, the British were saying, you didn't have that opinion back in 1776, did you? So economists are now actually looking at all this dire warnings that are coming from Obama and Cameron and saying, actually, Great Britain is going to be a lot better off outside the EU because they will not be paying taxes to Brussels. They'll be free from EU tariffs, which are an impediment to any kind of commerce going on. Basically, they've estimated being part of the European Union costs British families £4,600 a year, over and above what it costs to be in Great Britain. Brussels regulations are throttling British small businesses, and they're saying that a Brexit will boost the British economy by billions. And possibly as an insult to Obama, since he left Great Britain after his fear-mongering, the polls are now swinging back pro-Brexit. So, here in the United States of America, Immigration and Customs Enforcement have released 19,723 criminal illegal immigrants. They did not take them to the border and fling them over. They just let them go in the streets of America, including 208 convicted of murder, 900 convicted of sex crimes, 12,000 convicted of drunk driving, and who knows how many are carrying tuberculosis and other diseases. That's the immigration policy of Barack Obama and the Democrats. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about this story where the CDC was warning their own people internally of the risk of contracting tuberculosis from all these unaccompanied immigrant children pouring across the border. But there was no public announcement. That has now changed. According to this article in Investment Watch blog, CDC is now acknowledging publicly, not with a lot of fanfare, not with a lot of establishment media coverage, but yes, we are looking at a potential mass tuberculosis outbreak in the United States. which is just a boon for the doctors and the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies. Yes, we've got another disease we can use as a sales tool. Now, I remember when I was a kid, tuberculosis was still a problem. It got eradicated. We were a nation safe from tuberculosis. Now it's back, thanks to this open borders policy. We were a nation that was freed from polio. It's back, thanks to the immigration policy. We were a nation that had been freed from plague. It's now back, along with scabies and Zika and who knows, maybe even Ebola. Now, President Obama, who is for open borders for the U.S. so people can come and go as they will, has now announced they will be building a taller and stronger wall around the White House because of the two embarrassments they had earlier this week. So he gets a good, tall fence to be safe and secure. And you, well, you've got all these criminals that were just dumped into the middle of our society. Rapists, murderers, drunk drivers, but if you object to that, you're just being a heartless racist. Now, this one really annoyed me. This is coming out of the Organic Prepper, and it's been reported in a couple of other places. Apparently, a school trip in New York took a bunch of kids to the 9/11 Memorial. Now, we all know it's propaganda to sell the official story. But the kids and the teacher, while they were there, they just felt a burst of patriotic pride, and they just decided to sing the national anthem right there in front of the 9/11 Memorial. The security guards shut them down because apparently at the 9/11 Memorial, you are not allowed to sing the national anthem without the proper prior issued government permit. Now, if the kids had wanted to play some heavy metal music and break dance, I can maybe see that. But the national anthem, you need a permit now? What are these kids going to be thinking? Land of the free, home of the brave. They wanted to show their patriotic fervor for the U.S. government, and the government comes in and says, you can't do that. Not without a permit. You're not allowed to show adoration and pride in the nation without a proper permit. Remember Terry Gilliam's movie Brazil? Can't do a thing without a 27B/Z form. We're there. We are there. There is nothing in the Constitution that says we're supposed to have a government where we must ask permission to live our lives. The government may ban and punish criminal behavior, but it's not actually authorized to require us to obtain their permission to do things that are not criminal acts, like sing the national anthem. These kids probably are going to go home and realize they don't live in a free country. They live in a dictatorship. You can't even sing the national anthem without a permit. It's amazing. Alrighty, we're coming up on the last segment of our program here, and we're going to skip on down. As soon as you come back from the commercials, we're going to be talking about human-caused global warming. By the way, this is going to piss off Hillary Clinton and the gun grabbers. Over in North Carolina, a high school just opened a shooting range. Everyone's going to be, oh, it's a shock. It's a shock. Not when I was a kid. Everybody had gun ranges. Everybody had guns. We were all taught to shoot at age 12. We took our guns to school. Nobody was killed. We'd take the guns and stop by the family fields and varmint them on the way home. That was life. Nobody misused a weapon. Good for the North Carolina high school. We'll be right back with our last segment. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program on this Thursday. So this is the time we normally pay attention to human-caused global warming, which now that spring has finally come here, they're already ramping up the propaganda. So, of course, we put out on WhatReallyHappened.com an article about how there's heavy snow in Slovenia. I mean, the real thick, heavy, covering the cars and houses and everything like that. I was sent a video by somebody in Minnesota. They had snow coming down at noon. Now, it was just little bits of snow, and it wasn't accumulating, but it still hammers home the point. We're on the doorstep of May, and there's still snow falling in the northern hemisphere. At the same time, we're already hearing the propaganda come on out. Oh, the world is warming. It's all the carbon dioxide. It's all your blame. You will pay us money and obey us so that we can save the earth from you. Now, Obama's global warming plan, they've even abandoned climate change or climate disruption as the euphemisms. They have to stick with global warming because that's the only justification for targeting carbon dioxide as the villain. So Obama's global warming plan is going to cost America $44 billion, mostly focused on the middle and lower class. Because after all, the upper class don't pay taxes. That's why they had the Panama thing. Denmark is calling for a tax on red meat and basically saying people are now ethically obliged to change their eating habits. This is where all this global warming nonsense is going forward. It's not just about taking your money. It's telling you how to live your life. You shouldn't be eating pieces of cows and chicken. Here's a can of Monsanto food-like substance, and there's no ingredients list because you don't need to know what it is, but that's what you will eat to save the earth. That's how absurd it's gotten. Now, early on, we had a lot of embarrassing revelations for the carbon Nazis. There was the leakage of the emails and computer code from the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, which proved they were trying to hide the decline. Because when Al Gore cranked up all this global warming nonsense, the world actually was getting warmer. And then Mother Nature just decided to go the other way. And they had to keep the public from finding out about that because the goal of the global warming crisis was not to cure global warming, but to get rich off the process. Al Gore ended the 2000 presidential campaign virtually broke. Today he's a multimillionaire. Bought himself a nice oceanside house out in California. Gee, Al, I thought you told us the seas were going to rise and flood the coastline. Now, NASA was caught with climate fraud, rigging the data on an unbelievable scale. NOAA overestimated U.S. warming by 50%. Now, there's the National Ice Center, the NSIDC's turn. The National Snow and Ice Data Center got caught fudging the data and cooking the books. Anybody who says there's no such thing as wide-ranging government conspiracies, we got one right here on full view. Look at all the agencies involved. United Nations, IPCC, Penn State, University of East Anglia. They were all part of this conspiracy to convince you the world is getting warmer and it's all your fault. And they were all hoping to get rich off of it. Some of them already have. From the carbon credits and very plush research grants going on out, but it is a giant lie. Climate on Earth is controlled by solar output, which is in decline, and the changing shape of the Earth's orbit, which nobody can do anything about at all, no matter how much you pay in carbon taxes. Now, here's a very alarming story coming out of Tech Dirt. So much for the Fifth Amendment. Apparently, there's a man who's been held in prison for 7 months for refusing to turn over the password for 2 encrypted drives. Now, they're pushing this story that this is justifiable because they think the hard drives contain child pornography, which I'm in agreement. Very, very tacky stuff. The individual, the suspect, is a former Philadelphia Police Department sergeant. He personally has not been charged with any crimes, including child porn, but he's been thrown in prison for invoking his Fifth Amendment right to self-incrimination by refusing to provide the password. Now, the Supreme Court has previously ruled that anybody who refuses to turn over a combination to a safe or anything, that's their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. But this guy is in jail because the court is taking the position they haven't charged him with a crime, and therefore civil rights don't apply. The charge is against the hard drives, physical things, and the court is taking the position they have a right to lock up this former police sergeant until he provides the password. And the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply because the issue is the hard drive and not the sergeant. Obviously, if there's something on the hard drive that should not be there, they will charge the sergeant. But can you see how the government is trying to get around the Bill of Rights? The entire government, top to bottom, has this attitude that they shouldn't be limited by the Bill of Rights and the Constitution anymore. Now, I'm not supporting this sergeant or his child porn or whatever it is that's on the hard drive. But there are rules that are there to protect the American people from the government. That Constitution and the Bill of Rights is the original contract with America. And you are either following that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, or you are not a legal, legitimate government of this nation. All of us, every one of us, needs to adopt a zero-tolerance policy for infringements on our rights, whether it's the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms that are at least as capable as those being given to the drug criminals by Fast and Furious, with our Fourth Amendment right to privacy absent actual knowledge of a crime being committed, the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and by the way, down at the bottom of the Fifth Amendment, there's another one the government routinely violates. The government is not allowed to use your property without just compensation. Look at all this NSA spying. They're using our computers, our electricity, our bandwidth, and there's no just compensation. The federal government routinely violates the 9th and 10th Amendments. So, anyway, funny little incident happened. Apparently over at KCCI Channel 8 News, they were having the weather girl on there talking about some serious storms coming in through the area. And on the computer display of the weather, up pops the reminder, you should be upgrading to Windows 10. It's time for you to up, and it's right there, and the girl is just flustered and handled it very well. But isn't that nagware just really getting to be the most annoying thing on planet Earth? It really is. And the arrogance on display by Microsoft, I think, is probably going to encourage more and more people to go Linux. It's amazing. Now, here's another alarming story. This came out of the Daily Sheeple. Driverless trucks already being tested, and they're saying that the first 16-wheel driverless trucks are being tested. They did a test convoy across Europe to the port of Rotterdam, and the cost of the computerized trucks was 75% cheaper than trucks with human drivers. And they're saying, huzzah, huzzah, we're going to be able to fire the truck drivers. Well, there's a problem with that. The more you computerize and automate and fire people, the fewer people have money to go into the stores and buy what you're selling. You ever stop to think about that? We're aiming toward a situation of having shopping malls staffed entirely by robots standing around with absolutely nothing to do because nobody's got money to come on in and buy things because the robots took the jobs. Nobody is keeping an overview of what's best for the nation and the economy as a whole. I'm hoping Donald Trump will have that kind of a sense of the long view, the wide view, but we certainly don't have it today. Everybody's out for what's going to make themselves rich right now and doesn't care about the inconsequences because, after all, Adam Smith assured us if we're all personally greedy, the system will improve all by itself. By the way, Adam Smith was completely flat out wrong. You can ask John Nash about that. There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on GCN. And until then, Aloha America.